Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I'm your host, Jonathan Eacherberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Roger Torres, director of the short film Irma, which was selected as a semifinalist for the 2024 Student Academy Awards. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Roger Torres' passion for storytelling began with video games, and his curiosity led him to computer science. When he discovered that his true interest in games was the stories behind those games, he began studying film production at the University of Buffalo, and eventually received his MFA from the Dodge College School of Film and Media Arts at Chapman University. Roger joins me on the podcast to talk about his short film, Irma, which was selected as a semifinalist in the narrative category of the 2024 Student Academy Awards. Roger, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So your film tells the story of a young woman and her daughter, and they receive a visit from the woman's mother. It's clear that there's some strained relationship going on between them at the very least. Where did the idea for this story come from?
It came inspired by real life, man. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I didn't have my dad growing up, so it was just my mom. So we relied on my grandmother growing up. But due to my grandmother's circumstances, she was relying on drugs a little bit and eventually developed some sort of mental illness. We think it's schizophrenia, but we never kind of put a name on it. The doctors thought it was that, but we weren't sure. And just studying that relationship between my mom and my grandmother, it always just stuck with me when I was a kid. And then as I got older and more interested into stories and I don't know, when you watch movies now, as a director, you kind of dissect why you're enjoying something. And that relationship between my mom and my grandmother, I kept coming back to. And I thought about that night where it was interesting. As a kid, you perceive something as violence. There was this night where my grandmother had tried to break into our home, and I saw that as this big, oh my gosh, she's trying to murder us. She's trying to hurt me or something like that. But then as an adult, I could understand that outrage, that anger, that frustration was just her way of trying to see her family again, and trying to. I think why the film works is I think it plays on a couple of those perspectives. The little girl Lydia is clearly scared and she's not sure what's going on, but then Melissa is sort of mitigating this and trying to calm down Irma. So playing with these perspectives on what mental illness looks like in a family.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I mean, it's so sorry that you had to deal with that at a young age, and I certainly got a little bit of a horror vibe from the film at the very beginning until you started to kind of really understand what was going on. Yeah. I assume that's probably what you were going for in the first couple minutes until the scenario starts to play out.
Yeah, I wanted to present, I don't want somebody to come across as a villain. I think the best stories is where the villains, are empathetic and you can understand them. But I thought up front, the smartest way to do it was to present Irma. It feels weird talking about my grandmother like a character, but present her kind of like this scary villain. And hopefully as the film progresses and you feel empathy for her as Melissa tries to calm her down and talk to her emotionally and stuff like that, that you stop seeing her as this kind of scary person and you start seeing her as this mother that is just going through something and it's difficult for her to embrace this connection anymore.
Yeah, you can definitely feel for all the characters in the film, all three of them. Now, Melissa, the main character, kind of the one caught in the middle, faces a pretty big choice. She has to basically choose between protecting her daughter and, being, there for her mother at this time. Why did you feel it was important to bring to light that sort of situation, and something that we probably is a lot more common in society than a lot of people would want to admit?
I think there's two parts of it. One is just a personal connection. It's just I remember that moment so vividly, seeing my grandmother get arrested and stuff like that. It just leaves such an image with you. But then second, as a storyteller, why that creates interesting drama is in real life, we have friends and girlfriends and stuff like that where if a connection is strained, you can cut it off, ideally. You can break up with somebody, you can choose to move on. And as a storyteller, as a director, I was interested in how do you do that when it's family? Because you're connected to this person for life. So, you can try to run away from it as long as you can, but life has a funny way of always bringing these people back. And so I wanted to see a character make a very difficult choice in trying to let her mother go. I picture that scene, just as a director, I know it's not that, in the movie, but I picture that scene as, a breakup. And that's why Melissa, at the end, is crying because she thinks this might be the last time I see my mom because I can't keep allowing this type of thing to happen. I just thought that was such an interesting choice because I don't know, if I was in that position, I don't know how I would feel arresting my own mother.
Yeah, it certainly makes you think of what you would do as the viewer. What would you do in that situation? Kind of the things I thought of as I was watching it was the term generational trauma, something I've heard just kind of in news and around in the last couple of years. How do you think that relates to what you're exploring in your film, and why do you think it was, an important thing to talk about?
Dang, that's a saucy topic. Well, I mean, like clearly things are passed down. And I know it's an oversimplification, but the way my mother dealt with my grandmother is going to be different than how I deal with. And then, I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, I stay normal. I feel like I'm a normal guy, but obviously, I'll carry things and I'll pass down to my child and stuff like that too. But in terms of generational trauma, why I feel like that was important to talk about, especially in this story specifically, I feel like it's interesting because I talked about earlier how I felt like my perspective, like I pictured my grandmother as like this big bad wolf when I was young, but my mom knew a version of her mother that was quote unquote normal and lovable and like not dangerous before all this happened. So observing that as a kid, I couldn't understand why that connection even worked. Even as an adult, I can't still quite understand it, but I can try. And I think it's important to talk about those connections because there's still love there. And I think nowadays, because we're talking more about mental health, there's ways to recover those connections. But back then, I imagine for my mom, we didn't have access to resources like that to help my grandmother and stuff like that. So I think the film also, aside from just being a personal story, is if you remove the challenges you have in a relationship, there is still love there. And I think it is a connection worth recovering. It's just very difficult. And it's something that, sometimes it doesn't happen in our lifetime. Like my mother wasn't able to recover that relationship, but I think my relationship with my mom is strong, and I think my relationship with my future kids would be even stronger just because I know how to bridge the gap and talk about those hard topics. My mother still doesn't really enjoy talking about my grandma. It's a topic she tries to avoid altogether. So it was hard making this film, always kind of asking her a question every day, being like, what does she do? What does she wear? But it's necessary to talk about.
Yeah. Has your mother seen the film? And if she has, what did she think?
She has, man.
was that a edge of your seat kind of moment, just sitting there with her watching it?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to screen it for her in person. I will in November or in fall. We're waiting on a couple of festivals, but I know I have one guaranteed one in November for New York. So I want her to see it on the big screen so she can experience it, the way we intended it to be seen. But in Chapman, Dodge, when we screened our theses, we were live streaming it. So I sent her the link, and I mean, like, that was the only audience member I cared about. Not that I don't care about the other, 100 people that were in the room, but, I don't know. How they say every storyteller makes a movie for one person? Usually you're making it for yourself, but in this case, I was making it for her. Subconsciously or consciously, I'm not sure. But I knew when she was watching it, I'm like, this is the ultimate test. And she got it. It made her cry and stuff like that. And she told me I nailed the emotion of it. And it's not something she could express all the time. I find between me and my mother, I'm more articulate with my emotions. I think I know how to talk about them. I'm still working on it, of course, but I think I'm a step above her. But she told me she just felt it so viscerally, and that that end scene where Melissa's calling the police on Irma, she's like, that's what it felt like. So that's the biggest success of the film to me, was that conversation where.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about the three actresses you have. Obviously, you're casting people that to play people that and then obviously the little girl Lydia is kind of a stand-in for your own younger self. Tell me a bit about the actresses themselves and how you went about casting those roles.
Okay, I mean, this is casting is 90% of the battle. You know what I mean? As a director, you just hire good actors, and then it makes it look like you know what you're doing. Melissa is the main character. That character is playing my mom in the story. And that's portrayed by Maria Jimena Gastelum. Why it had to be Maria is I found during auditions, a lot of people played this role sort of tragically or a little, I don't mean to use this as a negative term, but it's the one I'm thinking of now. Kind of like soap opera. It was overly sad. It was overly kind of whiny. What I loved about Maria's character is she wasn't afraid to step up to Irma, which I think is needed because when you're a mother in that story and you're trying to protect your kid, you need a little bit of bite. You need a little bit of anger and frustration and defensiveness. I felt like she was the only actor that was really bringing that to the table. And not only did she have that anger, frustration, but she also had that vulnerability. And I think it's obvious in moments that she also feels scared because I'm 25 and I still feel awkward sometimes when I'm in like an argument with my mom. Like, no matter what I do or how big I get, she's head honcho. And I think she was able to play that duality very well of being a protective mom, but also being a scared daughter. And that was something we played around with a lot with her character. With Irma, full context, I'm from New York, Brooklyn, New York. My grandmother was raised in Brooklyn in like the 60s and stuff like that. So she grew up during a very tough time. So a lot of the dialogue when I wrote, I was basing off how my grandmother would talk. So Irma on the page is written pretty aggressively, has a little bit of bite. Why it had to be Christina Morrow, I found, is she has a little bit of a tender voice, a little bit of a sweet spirit, which I feel like is a interesting paradox because this character in the story is dangerous, right? But I think the audience needed to see why Melissa would open that door and allow Irma back in. You needed somebody who was equally lovable and equally scary. And I found during the audition process, a lot of people were leaning into like this big bad wolf sort of archetype. But Christina leaned more into the mom. I actually had to push her to try to be a little bit more intimidating as we went forward. But I think striking that balance is what allows the film to succeed, especially in the ending scene, because I think the film works because of that mother-daughter relationship. It doesn't work because the horror element. I think it's a part of it, but I don't think that's the point. And lastly, the little girl, Lydia, portrayed by Jasmine Valenzuela, she was just so good at being present, which is a little bit difficult for a kid actor. This is my second time working with a kid actor, and often I find they're aware of being on set. They're aware that they're in a scene sometimes. I don't know what it was about this little girl, but you told her what you needed from the scene, and she was just able to be there, which I think is needed, especially in the first scene that's so heightened. I don't know, just her awareness. I think it's pretty rare to find that in a kid that young. She was 9. I think she's like 10 now.
That's fantastic. I really like hearing the stories behind those and how they kind of changed a little bit as things were going along. And of course, I have to ask about the beautiful dollhouse in the film. Lydia's playing with it at the beginning of the film, and then it comes back in towards the end as well. Was that something that you found somewhere, or was that created specifically for the film?
It was created specifically for the film. Again, it's borrowed a little bit from my life. At night, when my grandmother had tried to break into the house, I remember playing video games and hearing the knock on the door, and like my whole world was about to change. Little did I know. But the dollhouse, when I was writing the script, I wanted to find a physical item that could be a metaphor for the film. And I think it goes back to what you were talking about in terms of generational trauma. Like in terms of simplifying it as much as possible, the dollhouse at the beginning is this nice, beautiful toy that this kid, like that's their protected world. And at the end, when you go back into it and it's torn apart and you see the police lights that have infiltrated the actual living room into the dollhouse, I don't know, for me, that was the best image to say what the film is ultimately about. Like this little girl has just been affected and like, who knows if she'll be the same. So we designed the dollhouse specifically to be that metaphor for the film. It was interior decorated and everything. My production designer, Isabella Campillo, amazing production designer. She got like a wooden dollhouse and then we painted it. We put the furniture and stuff like that. We also designed it to be, I mean, this is a super reach. Nobody will ever like get this. Like, it's supposed to just be like the film in the layers of the dollhouse. You know, it starts with the little girl with the 2 little toys. That's supposed to be Melissa and Irma, kind of. I think that dollhouse is just a metaphor for the whole movie.
Yeah, now I got to go back and watch and see those deeper levels there.
Yeah, I'll watch it on 0.25 speed.
There you go. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you do have some pending festivals and one that you're aware of. Are any that you can announce at this point where people can check out the film?
Yeah, we are currently waiting on a couple, and I'm confident about some of the other submissions, but I just, we're waiting for the notification dates. But right now, we are confirmed for the International Puerto Rican Heritage Film Festival in New York, which is a great festival, and I'm excited to bring the film home and screen for family and friends, because I've kept it away for some people. Everybody's like, you keep posting about it, I want to see it. I was like, you got to see it on the big screen.
Right.
So I'm excited to bring that home. Yeah, that's it for film festivals for now.
Excellent. I have a couple questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on to those, is there anything else you want to touch on about Irma?
I mean, I'm just incredibly proud of the film, man. I can't believe, I feel like a hack sometimes. Like, as you said in my introduction, I came from like a world of video games. So like, I love film, but like I've stretched a new muscle during my 3 years at Chapman to be a film director, and I still want to be. I definitely enjoy it. But sometimes I feel like I don't feel like a typical. When I was in my cohort, I didn't feel like I blended in because everybody like knows all these movies, and I'm still kind of learning. I don't know. Do you have any other questions for?
No, I'm good on the film, but I do have a couple others, so I'll move on to those. And this might be the hardest question that I ask of the day, but if you had to pick your top 3 films of all time, what would they be? No wrong answers.
All right, I'm gonna answer this in a Roger way. Let's see if somebody else has done this. The film that got me interested in wanting to make media was The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan. I don't know why, but I remember being, how old was I? Like 9 or 10. I was watching that movie with my aunt, and I had such a visceral experience of watching it that it was the only film I went back home and like on YouTube I watched like behind the scenes because I just wanted to know like how did they do this, which is weird because usually as a kid you just accept like you're watching Shrek or whatever, you're like fine,
Yeah.
it's a fun movie. That movie I had to understand how they made it, and then from there my curiosity just kept going. This won't be a movie, but it's another very influential piece of media on me. It was The Last of Us, directed by Neil Druckmann. Obviously, it's an HBO show now, but the show is adapted from the video game. That was the only piece of media I ever experienced where I was playing the game. I was 14 at the time, and something happened in the game, and I just had to pause it. Like I couldn't take it anymore. I've never watched something or played something or read something where I was like, I literally physically can't do this anymore. And I remember that experience so much because I mean that's the type of experiences as a director, writer, producer, whatever, you hope to make for people. So that would be my second one. And then this is not a movie, but I tell you, I'm a game person. I like movies, but I'm borrowing from my ethos.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the game that saved my life and still does to this day, it's super weird. It won't make any sense if you watch Irma, but it's a game called Kingdom Hearts. It's like, if you ever played Final Fantasy, it's this hybrid between Final Fantasy and Disney. And it's super dramatic. It makes no sense. The plot is so convoluted, but I love it so much. It inspired me to like be creative when I was younger. I don't know why, but there's some titles I think as adults we could go back and feel like we're a kid. That is one of the only IP I can do that with still to this day. So if I ever need to like reprogram my mind, I just play that game and I'm a kid again.
That's awesome. That's good. I've never had anyone who's given me a couple video games there, so that's perfect. And we can flex for this next question too. It's usually if you could invite any 3 movie characters to your next dinner party, but we can expand to video game characters as well if you want. Who would you invite if you could invite some characters to a dinner?
This is actually this is actually even harder in my opinion because the way I worked as a director, I think because I have the computer science background, I'm extremely analytical. Like I love digging into the weeds of things. So I talking to anybody is usually interesting to me. I don't know why this one appeared to me, but I want to talk to what's his name? The Leonardo DiCaprio's character from Inception.
Oh, Cobb.
I would love to talk to Cobb. 1, because he's so smart, but 2, I just love the secret of that film of like, what was it that he basically knew how his wife died the whole time and he was responsible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to talk to people who have those deep, dark secrets and like play because I don't know. There's empathy in everybody, man. But my characters will usually be a little bit like that. Another one is Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. I just want to. I mean, I'm not saying my grandmother is Travis Bickle, but like I like going down the road. I'll get back to the character stuff, but like I like telling stories about complicated, challenging characters. Like I think Irma is not a typical like protagonist or by any means, but like I like seeing how people arrive to that point. So I would love to just pick his brain, and then I'll throw a video game character in there for fun. I will do, I'll do Nathan Drake from Uncharted because this guy, he's a human being jumping out of planes and stuff like that. He has no superpowers. I just want to ask him, like, what's wrong with you?
Very good. I'll be an interesting dinner party for sure. And do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently? It could be fiction, nonfiction, don't have to be related to movies or video games or anything as well.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks. So, I mean, I have a hard time reading fantasy or like fiction. I don't know why. Like my brain is super like logical, so I like reading nonfiction stuff. So a book that has helped me tremendously as a director is Extreme Leadership Tactics by Jocko Willink. I know this is very shame, but he was a ex-Navy SEAL, and he still does like, I don't know, gym, army stuff and all that. I think for me, why that book works so much is it takes sometimes, to be fully transparent, I feel like directing could have a lot of ego attached to it. Like it feels nice to be like, I am the director, which is great. I love my job and hopefully what I do for the rest of my life. But I like to directing at the end of the day is just leadership. And I think that book simplifies it so much. It doesn't talk about working with actors and stuff like that, but it just strictly talks about accountability as a leader of a team. And that's how I like to take my directing approach. Like I like to be, obviously I'm like head honcho on my sets or whatever, but I don't want to feel bigger than anybody on the set. I want it to just be an even playing field. So that book helped me understand my leadership style. And I think it could be beneficial to any director.
Right.
And another one I'm listening to now, I've been listening to Batman Psychology on Audible because, I don't know, I just admire, and I think you can see this in Irma too, I just admire somebody being able to harness their pain or fear like that and make it their ethos, make it their weapon or stuff like that. And I feel like I've had to do that often in my life. I mean, I feel like Irma's one of the best examples, probably one of the most painful, traumatic moments of my life, but somehow that the Academy noticed that. So I don't know, I just find using your pain as like as fuel is just super interesting, and like I don't know who represents that better than Batman. So I've been listening to that.
Absolutely. Before we wrap things up, do you have any other projects, and also where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm currently writing a feature, multiple, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet because it's still early, like it's still a hot mess right now. In like 5 months, hopefully, it's looking like, a nice development script. But other than that, the thing that people can find me on right now is on Instagram, ROG_Torres. I post my film festival stuff, and I'm also a personal trainer, so my business is also there. And then on YouTube, it's Roger Torres. I'm currently editing an episode of a series I'm calling The Broke Filmmaker's Journey. And why I started that series is growing up, one of my favorite things to do is watch interviews of like people who've made it in the industry. And it's super inspiring hearing their stories of, I was this waiter at Starbucks or some restaurant, and now I'm this big actor or producer or whatever. But I think the tragic part of it, or not tragic, but like something I've noticed is these people are always telling the stories after they've made it already. I'm hoping to be somebody that could vlog their journey in the midst of it. And, hopefully some 10, 15-year-old kid right now could watch my series when they're 25 and in my position and be like, okay, I kind of see a blueprint. I kind of see the hurdles and stuff like that. I'm not just hearing about it, I get to see it. So I just want to be super transparent and vulnerable in my journey, and hopefully it helps somebody out.
That's fantastic, Roger. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of your time today. You've been very generous with it. I really appreciate you sharing such a raw story and also getting to hear about making the film.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me.
Thank you again to my guest today, Roger Torres. His short film, Irma, was selected as a semifinalist for the 2024 Student Academy Awards. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eacherberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eacherberg. Please be sure to come back for my next episode, where I will be speaking with Louis Giralt and Anna Denton, two of the creators of the short film Tokyo. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.